If everyone could take a moment to silence their cell phones. Okay, I see people. Cell phones and technology that I think William Gibson invented. Sure. We are so pleased tonight to have back to the Booksmith William Gibson, who is so much more than our greatest science fiction author of all time, and one who has imagined our world that has become a reality. Tonight, instead of reading about an imagined future in an alternate world, he's here with a collection of essays, Distrust That Particular Flavor. The New York Times said, in Distrust That Particular Flavor, Gibson pulls off a dazzling trick. Instead of predicting the future, he finds the future all around him, mashed up with the past, and reveals our own domain to us as a science fictional marvel. Gibson's writing enters the bloodstream like a drug, producing a mild hallucinogenic effect that lasts for hours. So please let the contact high begin, and give a very warm Booksmith welcome to William Gibson.
It is mild. It's very mild. It does last, I don't know if it lasts for hours. But nothing violent. One of the funny thing about touring this book is that there are a lot of these pieces that I've never read aloud to an audience before. And the first time I read something aloud to an audience is the first time I ever actually hear it. The first time. The first time. Hello? The first time I ever actually hear it and it hits me in the mouth. Anyway, that's not the case with what I'm about to read you now, because I gave this particular talk at the New York Book Expo in May of 2010. I was addressing a bunch of booksellers who were sitting there eating boxy lunches. So I knew it sort of didn't matter what I was going to say, so I sort of wrote my version of the Bruce Sterling State of Stuff talk. Say it's midway through the final year of the first decade of the 21st century. Say that last week, two things actually happened. Scientists in China announced successful quantum teleportation over a distance of 10 miles, while other scientists in Maryland announced the creation of an artificial self-replicating genome. In this particular version of the 21st century, which happens to be the one you're living in, neither of these stories attracted a very great deal of attention. In quantum teleportation, no matter is transferred, but information may be conveyed across a distance without resorting to a signal in any traditional sense. Still, it's the word teleportation used seriously in a headline. My no kidding module was activated. No kidding, I said to myself. Teleportation. A feeling of slight amazement. The synthetic genome, arguably artificial life, was somehow less amazing. The sort of thing one feels might already have been achieved somehow, triggering the, oh yeah, module. Artificial life, yeah. Though these scientists also inserted a line of James Joyce's prose into their genome. That triggers a sense of the surreal in me, at least. They did it to incorporate a yardstick for the ongoing measurement of mutation. So James Joyce's prose is now being very slowly pummeled into incoherence by cosmic rays. Noting these two pieces of more or less simultaneous news, I also noted that my imagination, which grew up on countless popular imaginings of exactly this sort of thing, could produce nothing better in response than a tabloid headline. synthetic bacteria in quantum free space teleportation shocker. Alvin Toffler warned us about future shock, but is this future fatigue? For the past decade or so, the only critics of science fiction I pay any attention to, all three of them, have been slyly declaring that the future is over. I wouldn't blame anyone for assuming that this is akin to the declaration that history was over and just as silly. But really, I think they're talking about the capital F future, which in my lifetime has been a cult, if not a religion. People my age are products of the culture of the capital F future. The younger you are, the less you are a product of that. If you're 15 or so today, I suspect that you inhabit a sort of endless digital now. Now, a state of atemporality enabled by our increasingly efficient communal prosthetic memory. I also suspect that you don't know it because, as anthropologists tell us, one cannot know one's own culture. The future, capital F, be it crystalline city on the hill or radioactive post-nuclear wasteland, is gone. Ahead of us, there is merely more stuff. Events, some tending to the crystalline, some to the wastelandy. Stuff, the mixed bag of the quotidian. Please don't mistake this for one of those after us the deluge moments on my part. I've always found those appalling, and most particularly when uttered by aging futurists, who of all people should know better. This newfound state of no future is, in my opinion, a very good thing. It indicates a kind of maturity and understanding that every future is someone else's past and every present someone else's future. Upon arriving in the capital F future, we discover it invariably to be the lowercase now. The best science fiction has always known that, but it was a sort of cultural secret. When I began to write fiction, at the very end of the 70s, I was fortunate to have been taught as an undergraduate that imaginary futures are always, regardless of what the authors might think, about the day in which they're written. Orwell knew it, writing 1984 and 1948, and I knew it writing Neuromancer, my first novel, which was published in 1984. Neuromancer, though it's careful never to admit it, is set in the 2030s, when there's something like the internet but called cyberspace, and a complete absence of cell phones, which I'm sure young readers assume must be a key plot point. More accurately, there's something like cyberspace but called cyberspace, but that gets confusing. I followed Neuromancer with 2 more novels set in that particular future, but by then I was growing frustrated with the capital F future. I knew that those books were actually about the 1980s when they were written, but almost nobody else seemed to see that. So I wrote a novel called Virtual Light, which was set in 2006, which was then the very near future, and followed it with 2 more novels, each set a few imaginary years later, in what was really my take on the 1990s. It didn't seem to make any difference. Lots of people assumed I was still writing about the capital F future. I began to tell interviewers, somewhat testily, that I believed I could write a novel set in the present, our present, then, which would have exactly the effect of exactly the affect of my supposed imaginary futures. Hadn't J.G. Ballard declared Earth to be the real alien planet? Wasn't the future now? So I did. In 2001, I was writing a book that became Pattern Recognition, my 7th novel, though it only did so after 9/11, which I'm fairly certain will be the real start of every documentary ever to be made about the present century. I found the material of the actual 21st century richer, stranger, more multiplex than any imaginary 21st century could ever have been. And it could be unpacked with the toolkit of science fiction. I don't really see how it can be unpacked otherwise, as so much of it is so utterly akin to science fiction, complete with a workaday level of cognitive dissonance we now take utterly for granted. The booksellers stared at me. Reluctantly,